Okay, nice. So first of all, hi. I'm sorry I cannot be there physically. And as Dylan said, I'm based in Copenhagen. And I really enjoyed the previous conversation, first of all, because as it was mentioned, it's very interesting to talk about accessibility and diversity also from a cultural perspective. So one thing that in Denmark, actually, sign languages are not used much anymore because, especially for children, they get what is called auditory verbal therapy from where they are very young. So they actually also children who have different hearing abilities, they can have some possibility to use um, verbal language from when they're very young if they get the proper training. And in Denmark, we pay a lot of taxes, but those are used also for a good purpose, like helping children with different abilities. So I'm working in this lab in Copenhagen. It's called Multisensory Experience Lab because we develop novel technologies for different purposes. So we look at, we mostly focus on sound, but we also look at how can we develop technologies to be taken outside the lab. In this specific case, we are working with the local hospital. And in the local hospital, there is a Center for Hearing and Balance, where they specifically work with children. And children, they get a cochlear implant from a few months. Now in Denmark, there has been, from the past few years, there has been a new law where all the children, they can get for free a cochlear implant. So this means that they can use language, Danish language specifically, from when they're young, but of course they still encounter some challenges. So the challenge that the hospital wants us to address is how to train what they call the new generation of children with hearing loss to gain abilities that they lack. Specifically, we are talking about teens. So they got their cochlear implant like 10 years ago. And they still have, they can speak, they can sit in a classroom, but they still have challenges in social situations. So in Denmark, actually, I don't know if you are familiar with, but there are 3 of the largest hearing aids companies in the world. And one of the most common research topic lately in hearing research is how to ensure what is called ecological ability, which means, in traditional hearing research, you sit in a laboratory, you listen to a sound, and you find out if you can hear it. Of course, this is not how we hear in the real world, where we move around. We have so many sound sources. We have visual cues. We have tactile cues. So hearing research is trying to introduce XR for more traditional experiments. But we got approached 3 years ago. We got approached by the local hospital for a project called Lyt again, which means listen again in Danish. And this is collaboration with a speech and language pathologist from the hospital and our laboratory. So the idea of this project is that how can we help children, and especially like young teens who got a cochlear implant, to train their spatial abilities. So through interviews with children and going to investigate if they still have some needs in terms of hearing, we found out that they still have troubles with sound localization, especially in very noisy environments. In this case, if the children go to school, if they're sitting in a classroom, they know where to sit. But if they are in the break, it's, the classical playground environment where it's very noisy, and they still could use some help in those situations. Or if they go in a school trip. So in this project, what we did, the goal was to develop some also gamified, like in the very nice previous presentation, gamified solutions where the teens, they get a VR game, they can train at home, and then they come back and we see if this game, which trains their spatial skills, has any effect in their everyday life. So in this game, just to give you an idea, we develop, it's more sound-based games, and they visit the local virtual reality simulation of the local music museum, and also they experience their school playground. So the idea is that they go around, they gain lots of trophies, and those trophies are specialized in. And in the case of the music museum, they go around the museum, and then they need to recognize the timbre of different musical instruments, because there is also some evidence that learning about music, which is a more universal language, they can also have some benefits in speech. So maybe for the benefit of time, I'm not going to show you much about the game, but please feel free to contact me. And I'm really hoping to come next year physically, so you can actually try this and other intervention that we did for the benefit of individuals with different hearing abilities in collaboration with the hospital. So yeah, just to see, they enter the space and they choose museum, or they choose the playground. Yep. And then, so I'm not going to show you the video, but again, feel free to contact me. You can get a simulation. You can get, it's for Oculus Quest 2, so you can just get a build and you can try it. So here is more a screenshot about it. So it's very cartoonified, obviously, because I mean, we are a research lab, pretty small, working with an hospital, so we cannot implement very fancy graphics. But it actually worked for the children and they enjoyed it. And I'm going to talk more about that. So here, the Music Museum. If you come to Copenhagen, please let me know, because you can also visit the physical museum, and then you will see that the representation is pretty realistic. So the project again was for 2 years, and we had the 22 children involved. So these children, they had to take the head-mounted display at home, because we really want them to take technologies out of the lab and use them as if it was a traditional grain platform they're used to. And so 60 children had a bilateral implantation, and 5, so sorry, I cannot see now. I have the, yeah, so 15 children had a bilateral cochlear implant, 5 had on one side the cochlear implant, on the other side the hearing aid. 5 had the bilateral hearing aid, and 1 had a bilateral solution. So what you can see in this graph, again, I go quick because you are waiting to go for lunch, but we could measure that they actually, as expected, actually as wished, the more they play the game, the more trophy. So the trophies are when they successfully finish one part of the game. We didn't have the ethical permission from the hospital to measure more data from the head-mounted display. And this is what we have been working since. So to get a more thorough investigation of the effect of this home play game on the improvement on their hearing skills. So for now, we can just see some positive trends. So the more they play, the better they get in spatial awareness. Also, we got some qualitative feedback. For example, some of the kids, they came back after practicing soccer and they said, oh, after playing the game, I realized that I need to put myself very close to the train trainer because so I can hear her better. So these are more, of course, anecdotal, but they are still very nice indication that this kind of VR intervention, they can also be useful for them in real life. And so just quickly, I want to talk about another application that we developed in our lab. So in this case, we saw that while teenagers, they really like to work with specifically virtual reality solutions, that was not the case for elderly individuals with different hearing abilities. They really like to have a contact with the real life. And 2 years ago, we had the only high quality augmented reality device that we had was the HoloLens. So we created this visualization of different musicians. So in this case, it was specifically designed for some elderly musicians that were missing going to concerts because they had, in the specific case, they also got a cochlear implant and they were having a hard time distinguishing the timbre of different performers. So this is one very well-known skill or very well-known challenge for individuals with a cochlear implant that they can distinguish individual voices, but they have a hard time when there is an ensemble, like in this case. So we were investigating if it is possible to train them again, but in the musical skills, visualizing some specific instruments and see if this training was transferable to real life. With the HoloLens, it was somehow successful, but one of the challenges that we had, which is obviously a big problem in the case of spatial awareness, is calibration. So it was kind of challenging to match the visual appearance of an instrument to the auditory appearance. And in that case, so just a little bit of dislocation obviously was creating confusion in this training. So I want to show you this app where it's meant to be for a therapist helping a person who wanted to learn about the timbre of musical instruments. So for those of you who don't know, timbre is distinguishing different instruments who have maybe are playing the same tone, but what distinguishes a piano from a flute. This is what timbre is. Actually, timbre doesn't have an official definition. It's more what it is not. And so here the therapist has a tablet and can move around the different instruments. And the more they are merged together, the more they should be segregated so the person can learn, oh, this is a guitar, this is a bass. And then, so this is an example of the simulation. And so the person with the HoloLens can see the different instruments and localize them in space. And this is using, obviously, also the ventriloquism effect, but how far can we have a discrepancies? This is still a question. How far can we have a discrepancies between visual and auditory information in such a way that we can still segregate them together? And of course, that is not a question that is easily answered, and it also depends a lot on the hearing abilities. But when is this ventriloquism effect useful, and when is it actually not damaging actually the training? So, and yeah, just to give some final remarks, I don't know if there is time for questions, but so we have this collaboration with the hospital, which is very beneficial for us to design not only with the speech and language pathologists, but also with the families and the children. And our main challenge, I would say, is how to create some XR solutions that are enjoyable because we don't want to interfere with their everyday life. We want them to have something that they would like to try, but at the same time, we want to measure that it has an effect. So we have this trade-off that is not so easy to solve, especially when they take the technologies home. And yes, so we want to work in these 3 domains. So both the acoustics technology, the multisensory perception, and also how to bring it out of the lab and take it to, so it has a societal interest. So I think I can stop my talk here so you don't go so much over time.
All right. Thank you so much, Stefania.